A buddy of mine asked me about prayer and the significance of prayer. If you have not seen the video on why evangelism if God is sovereign, I would recommend checking out that video. So, first of all, I'd like to say that I do believe that God is sovereign and nothing happens that he has not ordained, and that he is truly in control of all things. And so we might ask, does prayer change things? This is what the buddy of mine asked me. Does prayer change things? And so there's two answers I'd like to give. Yes and no. Prayer does not change the divine plan of God. God has set forth and decreed an eternal plan from the beginning. Before the world began, the end was already ordained. Judas was ordained to betray Jesus. Pharaoh was built up for that very purpose of making God's power known. Could Pharaoh have not fulfilled his purpose? Did God not harden Pharaoh's heart? Did Judas have a choice? Could he have not fulfilled the decrees that were written in advance? Hundreds of years in advance, it was written that Jesus should be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. Coincidence that Judas got paid 30 pieces of silver? Hundreds of years in advance, it was decreed that there would be the field purchased with those pieces of silver. Was that chance, or was that a decree of God? God had ordained that he would set those people free from the Egyptians. And then he said something interesting to Moses, that he was going to destroy them. But Moses prayed to God that he would not destroy them. And God repented from being ready to destroy them. But if you look at how Moses prayed, he reminded God of what God said. But does God forget? Does he need little tiny specks of dust, us, little tiny specks of people walking around a small planet smaller than the sun? You can't even see it in the vast expanse of the universe. You can't even see our planet. If you were to stand on Mars, you think you could see people? You can't see people from Mars. We're tiny. You think these little tiny things could remind the mind of God? God who knows every star in existence, God who knows every piece of sand on the beach. You think God forgets things that a puny human can remind him about? No, he does not forget. He is not a man. He does not forget. God is eternal. God is perfect in knowledge. There's no information that we possess that we need to give to God so that he can remember, like, oh yeah, thank you for reminding me. Whoo-hoo, how embarrassing is that? God is not like that. He's not like, oh, excuse me, I forgot. Sorry, I'm so sorry, I forgot all about that. It's not God. Does not forget. Yet, at the prayer of Moses, God repented from the evil that he said he would do. But I want to point out that it was God's plan that there should be a mediator between the wrath of God and the salvation of the people. Moses praying for the people against the wrath of God, God said, I will forgive them and allow them to live and now go down. So we see a picture here of God saying wrath is coming, a mediator saying, please don't do it for your name's sake. God saying, okay, and then extending mercy. It looks like the picture of Christ. The wrath of God coming on people, Christ, the mediator, coming in, taking God's wrath, and then God extending mercy. God's plan from the beginning is to extend mercy. So the prayer goes up. God does what he had always planned on doing through using a mediator. So in prayer, we can be used of God to do what God has already planned. So, does prayer change God's plans? No, it does not. Does prayer change things? Yes, it does, as God ordained. I thought of a t-shirt. We can change our shirts. You can take off your shirt and put on a new one. Did God ordain that? Yes. If you don't change your shirt, you'll be wearing the old shirt for a long time until you change it. And did God know that that was going to happen? Yes. Prayer is something like changing your shirt. You can decide not to pray and be stuck in that same thing for a long period of time. Or you can pray and change your shirt or change your situation. It doesn't change God's plan, but God has given us this responsibility of changing our clothes in order to put on new ones. Same thing with prayer. He allows us to change things within our sphere of influence. So it appears as though we're changing things, but in actuality, we're merely being used to fulfill God's eternal purposes. So pray. Yes, pray, pray, pray. This is how God has ordained things, that His means will be accomplished through prayers. I'm sorry if it's not really that profound or whatnot, but my main thing is to combat people being stagnant because of the sovereignty of God. Just because God is sovereign does not mean that He didn't give you certain responsibilities, like changing your clothes, or otherwise you begin to stink and you have dirty clothes on. So you change them. Just because God is sovereign doesn't mean, oh, well, I'm not going to do nothing and just sit here in my filth and die. No, He's also called us to do certain things for certain purposes. Pray without ceasing. I recommend prayer. I believe in sovereignty, but I know God works His purposes through prayers. Pray. Do it. I recommend it. Don't give up. Understand that His purposes will be accomplished. Be used. Do it. Pray. Longer. More. And then also on prayer, what I want to also say is that in going into prayer, when you realize how big God is, oftentimes when you sit there in prayer and start the prayer off the way Jesus recommended that we started off, which is through recognizing that God is our Father in heaven, not our Father here on earth. Heaven is high above the universe. Can a satellite dish fly into outer space and accidentally pass heaven up? No. Heaven is high above, out there. It's bigger, it's greater, it's more. God is up there in the heavens, beholding down these little specks on earth, high above. Recognize who you're talking to. Second, He's holy, completely different, completely other. As you start to grasp the greatness of God and how big and large He is, you start to realize how small and insignificant you are and how much power He has. When you start to count the amount of stars there are, and He knows them all, and then you start to learn about the body and how many cells there are, and He knows them all, and then you realize how small we are, and He knows us all. There's a sense of tininess that takes place within our lives, causing us to feel small, and then causing us to realize how big He is. So in prayer, you recognize your smallness, you realize His largeness, and you become useful for service. Because He doesn't need a little speck of dust to help Him. He wants to use those who are spiritually poor, who realize that we're tiny. He doesn't want this person who thinks they're all big and high and mighty. You know what He does with those big, high and mighty people? First of all, God hates a proud look. Second of all, it's laughable. This little speck of dust thinks he's high and mighty, like I need his help. My power is made perfect in weakness. Be weak. Don't just say, oh, I'm weak, I'm weak. Be strong in knowing that He that is in you is powerful. But understand that in yourself, you can do nothing. I can do nothing in myself. It's the Spirit of God that moves within people to accomplish big purposes. Be willing to be made small, that you can serve a large God and impact the world with smallness. Well, I have this media here, that potentially reaches the world within minutes. So anybody could watch this YouTube video. You think, oh, what a great tool I have. Look back at the apostles. They had a pen and paper. They didn't even have cell phones to call people. So you would think that they would not be able to impact the world. But it's the power of God that moved through those pens and those pencils or quills or whatever it was they used. Such a lack of technology. No technology. Not even, an airplane to send this message from one part of the world to the other. That shows you that it's the power of God that sends those messages out. So don't be so overly concerned with your ability to send the message out or your ability to perform. Let God do his work. He was able to make known to America 2,000 years later things that a tiny man had written down on a piece of lambskin or whatever it was they used to write on. It was like a little piece of paper, and he was able to preserve that and reach you, me. It's his power. Pray that he would use you. Pray that you would be made small. Pray that he would show you his largeness. Pray that he would show you himself. Because when you see how beautiful he is, then you desire that. You don't want what you don't want. So if you find yourself not really wanting God or those things, it's because you just honestly have not seen him. He's not standing here in front of us. But if he makes himself known to you, you'll begin to see him and his greatness. And that's when you'll start to desire that. And when you want something, you're going to get it. Because you're going to go after it. Because you're like, I want that. God wants you to want him. But in order to want him, you need to see him. And if you're blind, you can't see. Pray that God will take the blinders off your eyes and allow you to see his glory and his beauty. Like Moses prayed, Father, show me your glory. Show me it. Pray that same prayer, that you would see his beauty and desire it. Like if you see some ice cream and you want it because it looks good to you, when you see God, he will look good to you. Be prepared though, that you're going to find out he's big, he's powerful, he's dangerous. Like the sun. The sun gives life to the world. The sun that shines in the sky, it's beautiful, it's powerful, it's large, but it's dangerous. It's wonderful in the warmth that it gives to us and the life that it gives to the world, but you better respect the sun, because if you get too close, you're going to burn. Pray that God would protect you and take you closer into his presence, that you may have some of his life within you and warm the world with your light. Pray, be used. God is sovereign, but you can be used.